So the following is an introduction to using loops in Python. The keywords that we use when creating Python loops are for, in, range, break, continue, and while. Here are a few examples just to illustrate the basics. For I in range 5, print I. What this example does is it sets up a for loop with this first line. For is the beginning keyword. Then we have a variable I. This can be named anything you want. The keyword in, and then the function range. The range function will take a number, and the way that the for loop works is that I will take on all of the values between 0 and 5 minus 1. So there will be 5 total values, but it starts at 0. So we'll get 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. We go through the loop. The way the for loop works is we execute everything inside of the loop once for each element, and each time we go through the loop the value of I changes. So the first time through the loop I is 0, the second time through the loop I is 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And here we're illustrating this simply by having a simple print statement on the for loop. So again, the statement for I in range 5 means start a for loop, and each time through the loop the variable I will take sequential values between 0 and 4 as set up by the range function. I can be any variable you choose, but the name I is common, and range 5 has 5 elements that go from 0 to 4. The number 5 is not included because we start at 0. Here's another example. For I in range 5, and then inside this function we have an if block. If I%2 is equal to 0, then we print I is even, else print I is odd. So this percentage symbol means modulus. It's the modulus operator, and it takes the remainder after division. So when we execute this code, 0 is even, 1 is odd, 2 is even, 3 is odd, 4 is even, as we've set up this function. Here's another few more range examples. The range function can take multiple arguments. If you just pass range 5, then it'll go from 0 to 5. If instead you pass in range 3, 8, it will go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, it stops one number before 8, but we can start and stop in on different numbers. We can give a third argument. The final argument is the step size. So normally the step is 1, but if we do range 4, minus 1 to minus 1, it'll go 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Again, it stops 1 before getting to the last element. So in this case we can count down instead of counting up. And finally, range 1 to 6, 2 will go 1, 3, 5. So it stops before we get to the 6, and in this case we're incrementing the range function by step size of 2. So there's a couple convenient ways to use this range function. We can perform nested loops. If we have n out equals 2 and n equals 4, we can put an outer loop with our iteration variable I out. So for I out in range n out. Then inside the loop we have a print statement where every time through the outer loop we print I out equals I out. And then we have an inner loop here. For I in range n in, print I in equals I in. So in other words, the way this will work is for each outer loop we have an inner loop that will execute fully before going back out, printing, and then going the inner loop. So here n out is 2, so we have 2 outer iterations, here, and then for each outer iteration we have an inner iteration that goes through from 0 to 3, because we're iterating from 0 to nn minus 1, where nn is 4. So this illustrates how a nested loop works. There's important statements that are convenient: break and continue. Break works by stopping the current loop, It's convenient for special conditions that might arise. For example, suppose you want to loop for some maximum possible number of iterations, but break out early if some condition is met. Like suppose you are iterating on some quantity and your error was within some tolerance, then you can break out early. The continue statement skips everything that happens in the loop after the continue statement, goes back to the top of the loop for the next iteration. So it doesn't stop the loop, rather it tells the function to go back to the start, stopping or ignoring whatever's below. So here's an example of the break. N equals 6 for I in range n. If I happens to be 3, then break. And here we have a print statement, I equals I of n minus 1. So you can see that it would normally go from 0 to 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but when we hit 3, we call a break statement and the output ceases. This can be any conditional. It doesn't need to be a conditional on the iteration variable. It can be any kind of conditional statement that you want to put in here. Here's an example of using continue. Again, n equals 6 for I in range n. And in this case, we have if I is 3, then we're going to print I equals 3, go to the next loop. And then we have a continue statement. And then print doing work for I equals I. So in this case, we go through an I equals 0. At the beginning, I is 0. So it's not 3, so we don't do any of this. And we print doing work for I equals 0. Then we go again. Now I is 1. Again, it's not 3, so we don't do any of this. We hit the print statement, doing work for I equals 1. Then I equals 2 similarly. Finally, we get to I equals 3. Now this is true, so we print I equals 3, go to the next loop. That's what gets printed. And then the continue statement skips this final print statement because we're skipping it and going back up to the top of the loop. So you'll notice there's no doing work for I equals 3 because then we go back to the top of the loop. Now I is 4 and this is skipped again, and we continue doing this work that follows. Another less common loop syntax, but can be useful in circumstances, is the while loop. This can be useful especially when you don't know beforehand how many iterations you want to do, or to just give a little bit different condition on your statement. So you can loop on a condition rather than looping through some predetermined range of values. So here's an example. We'll set I equals to 0 and then while true, so this will always evaluate to true. Then we have I plus equals 1. This is the same as if I had typed I equals I plus 1. And while true will set up an infinite loop. So if you're going to use an infinite loop, you need to make sure to have a break statement somewhere. So in this case, we increment I each time through the loop. We print the value of I, and you can see each time through the loop, I starts at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I have a condition here that says if I is 5, then break out of the loop. And that way it doesn't go forever, it stops at some desired position. We could also do something like the following. I equals 0 while I is less than 5, then increment I and print. Again, this will go forever unless I have a statement that increments I, because if I is 0, then it's always less than 5, and if I didn't have this increment statement, then it would loop forever, which is a major problem. For loops don't have to just use the range function. The range is probably the most common, especially in numerical work, but range effectively sets up a list of integers, but you can use other kinds of lists. For example, let's make a string ss equals my name is Jerry, and then for s in ss, print s. So s is going to take on each character in the string. So effectively the string is a list of characters, and s is going to take on each value in that list of characters. And you can see what gets output on each separate line as we go through the loop. My name is Jerry. You can also have a list of files. Here we set up a list of files. These square brackets are how we would create a list of objects. So this is a list of strings. And I have a string called f_1.text, comma f_2.text, comma f_3.text. And then I can go for file in files. So it's going to go, so file will take on the value of each of these strings in succession. So we can print the file and it gets printed out to the screen. Finally, there's a convenient function called enumerate. If we take the same example that we had above and change our for loop to be for I, comma file in enumerate files, this enumerate function on each pass is going to give both the index of the file, so this is 0, 1, and 2, and also the value. So up here all we had was file, we didn't know which one it was. And the enumerate function is a convenient way to find both the file and the index. So here I print I, comma file, and each time through the list I get 0, then the first value in the list, 1, then the second value in the list, 2, and the third value in the list. And that's those are the main basics of using loops in Python.